Please welcome Atlantic Council President and CEO Frederick Kemp. Bitte begrüßen Sie Atlantic Council Präsident und CEO Frederick Kemp.
Was the 20th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall. But we're also here on the eve of another historic anniversary. Tomorrow marks the 70th anniversary of the beginning of the Soviet blockade of Berlin, the defining crisis of the first months of the Cold War. The Soviet Union blocked all access to areas of Berlin under Western control. I won't go into much detail here. You can look it up. It's a fascinating tale. But it came a few days after the introduction of the new Deutsche Mark. So everything in the end also is economic and political and security. It was this crisis where the Soviet Union blocked all access to areas of Berlin under Western control that tested for the first time how far the Allies would go, how far the United States would go, the British would go, to protect the freedom of post-war West Germany and West Berlin. In response, over the course of the next 15 months, the Western Allies, in particular US and British militaries, came together in a Herculean effort to airlift in supplies each and every day to sustain West Berlin. General Lucius Clay, 2 days after the start of the blockade, gave the order to launch what he called Operation Vittles. On the following day, June 26, 32 C-47s carried 80 tons of cargo, including milk, flour, and medicine. General Clay told his betters in Washington that this would be a 3-week operation to break the blockade. Over the course of the operation, which went from June to the next year, the Soviets only really gave up the blockade when they saw there was no surrendering on the Allies' part. So it went from June to the following May, and then the airlift itself lasted to the following September. So this 3-week operation in the end went over a year, and Allied forces flew 200,000 flights and dropped 8,893 tons of supplies. One of the heroes of this airlift, U.S. Air Force Colonel Gale Hal Halverson, took on an unauthorized mission that became a subset of Operation Vittles. It became known as Operation Little Vittles. His was an effort to raise the morale of West Berliners in the simplest of ways. He had given some Wrigley chewing gum to a couple of children in West Berlin, and it was one piece, and they broke it up into about 10, and then those that didn't get the piece were smelling the wrapper, and he said, "I see an opportunity here." And so he said, "I'm going to bring you more candy." And they said, "Well, how will I recognize you?" And he said, "I'll wiggle my wings as I come over Berlin." And so he did that. Via mini parachutes, American candy. Over time, he dropped 23 tons of candy to the citizens and the children of Berlin. Lots of it was donated by US children once the word got out, and then by American manufacturers. In the words of what we've been talking about the last couple of days, if you had done #Candy Bomber at that time, it would have gone viral. So tonight we have dropped a piece of candy on each of your plates, or a couple, as a nod to Colonel Halverson and a nod to the impact of one man or one woman's actions who believe in freedom and what impact that action can have on a whole population, and a nod to the bonds of our transatlantic community, because I can promise you, had it not been for the Berlin airlift, there would not have been a NATO. There would not have been a reunification of Germany, and we would not be sitting here tonight celebrating new freedom fighters. By the way, Colonel Halverson, I have a soft spot for him because he was from Salt Lake City, Utah, and so am I. But he did not have German heritage, and so do I, and I do. And so for me, Berlin is a special place because when the wall went up, it didn't just divide the unfree and the free worlds. It didn't just divide East and West Germany. It divided our family. So for me, this city has global meaning and very, very local meaning. So it's incredibly fitting that on this anniversary and on our 10th anniversary of the Freedom Awards, we return to Berlin, a city that is the embodiment of the triumph of freedom and democracy. Our awards have always honored for those who fight for these principles. Many of you here spent the last 2 days at our 360 OS Open Source Summit. And in doing so, you joined our grassroots movement to harness the technologies that some would use to divide us, to bring us together and fight for truth in the digital space. So, before we get going, I want you all from 360 OS to applaud yourselves. Thank you. What the last 2 days have underscored is the nature of the trials we face as a global community have shifted, and therefore we have to refine our strategies to overcome these challenges. Old language, old solutions, old approaches won't cut it. And the impressive group of awardees that we honor tonight embody just that. They hail from different regions, industries, and different generations. But together they exemplify the courage, passion, and dedication that is needed to build a global community fundamentally rooted in the fundamental causes of freedom, democracy, and human rights. All of the honorees you will meet tonight share a conviction that together we can overcome the greatest issues of our time, both globally and very locally. As they break down barriers and inspire others to do the same, these trailblazing women, women and a girl, these trailblazing females are redefining what freedom means to our generation and a new generation. That is why tonight we recognize Secretary Madeleine Albright for championing democracy and human rights for all, and for her unwavering devotion to building a secure and a prosperous world. Secretary Albright. And thank you so much for inspiring so many others, including me, including Damon Wilson, including all of us at the Atlantic Council. Not too far away from Secretary Albright is my newest best friend, Bana Alabed. For her innovative use at 9 years of age, and then she was 8, of social media to document the plight of Syrian children in war-torn Aleppo, and for her awareness, drive, and maturity well beyond her years. Bana. My own 10-year-old daughter would be crashing at this time, so thank you so much. Secretary Albright, Bana, in all of our Freedom Awards over the last 10 years, this is the biggest gap of generation that we've had. But I must say, you inspire me about the future, and Secretary Albright inspires us that a lifetime led on behalf of freedom is a lifetime well spent. Third, the International Women's Media Foundation, for building press freedom from the ground up by supporting the critical work of women journalists, understanding that freedom is threatened not just by conflict or direct oppression, but also by apathy and lack of opportunity. So please applaud the International Women's Media Foundation. And finally, pop star Ariana Saeed for selflessly using her musical talents to bring people together, to support women and girls in Afghanistan, and to stand up for injustice. To become a star of such talent and be so recognized is a hard thing to do in any country in the world. It is an almost impossible thing to do in Afghanistan, and so many people in so many places of the world are inspired by you. So it will be an honor for us to honor you as well. This impressive representation, all of them female leaders, you can also be a leader at age 9, illustrates the power of the individual in the face of a spectrum of challenges, some newly emerged, others echoes of the past. The call is to act as a community and to take decisive action, and it could not be louder. And the message of the Berlin Airlift is, what is the cost of not doing so? Tonight's honorees all answered that call, and for that we take this moment to pause and celebrate their actions tonight and their impact in the world. It must be said, of course, that this pause, sadly, does not apply to the World Cup. So rest assured, we will be streaming tonight's match during our dinner break and even after the close of the program. If you really are virulently in favor of Germany winning this match, the former Prime Minister of Sweden, Carl Bildt, is here in the front row, and he probably would like to have a conversation with you. Which brings me to a few words of gratitude. We at the Council are also stronger as a community, working hand in hand with our partners. There are too many here we're working with tonight to name you all. But I would like to thank our Freedom Award supporters, without which we would not be here. The Foreign and Commonwealth Office of the United Kingdom, Facebook, Twitter, Microsoft, Ambassador Rockwell A. Schnabel, and Ambassador Victor Ashe. Thank you so much for making this evening and these last 2 days possible. And finally, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to the former Freedom Award honorees in this audience this evening. Ambassador, and maybe you can stand so people can see where you are, Ambassador Dan Fried, Ambassador Jerzy Kosminski, and former Prime Minister of Sweden, Carl Bildt. I encourage you to engage in social media with this incredible community, using the hashtag, and also those not in the room. I think we're streaming this. If we're not, start. Using the hashtag AC Awards. So thank you for joining us, and with that, it's my honor to welcome to the stage, and I want to say a couple of things about him. The former Freedom Awardee, Horst Teltschik, a personal friend, someone who was on the front lines of freedom throughout his impressive career, playing an instrumental role in German reunification. I won't tell you one story, I will tell you another. So I worked for the Wall Street Journal for many years, and he was a source, and I won't tell you those stories. But thank you, Horst, for talking to me during that period of time. The second I will tell you, which is after the fall of the Berlin Wall, might have been around middle of November, going on November 19th or so, he met with the Chancellor, Helmut Kohl. And they were talking about what they should do next. And Horst Teltschik, being a person who understands the sweep of history and when to take a moment to grab the chance, said to the Chancellor, I think it's time to tell the German people and tell the world that we're all in for German unification and we're going for it. There was no consultation with the US at that point, with the British, with the French, on the fact that he was going to do that. And they even kept it a secret from the foreign minister of that time, Hans-Dietrich Genscher, but that's another book. Chancellor Kohl said, "Go ahead, write the speech." Join me in welcoming Horst Teltschik to the stage for all he's done over his lifetime for freedom and democracy.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, Secretary Albright, Your Excellencies. First of all, I was told to ask you to start eating. Well, Fred, thank you for the kind introduction. Well, back in 2016, when I last stood on the Freedom Awards stage in Wroclaw, in Breslau, the tone was optimistic. As I stand before you now in 2018, some might say we are living in unprecedented times. The United States and the countries of Europe seem to be no longer united. Immigration, trade, energy, populism, even defense, these are just a handful of the issues that divide us. Many of you in the audience may be too young to remember the events surrounding the end of the Cold War and the fall of the Berlin Wall. For those of you who do recall, you know that the process of reunification was never guaranteed. It took mutual respect, mutual trust, commitment, and a keen acknowledgement of the historic moment. Back then, we came together as a global community, working hand in hand to ensure a peaceful reconciliation and build a better world. May I just remind you of the Charter of Paris for a new Europe from Vancouver to Vladivostok, signed by all 35 presidents and heads of governments of the CSCE countries in November 1990. What a vision, but who really took care of it? The United States was one of Germany's greatest partners in all these efforts. The challenges we face today may be unprecedented, and they are certainly concerning, but they are not insurmountable. It is often difficult without hindsight to comprehend the complexity and the magnitude of the moments in which we live. I speak from experience. But make no mistake, just as we overcame great trials before, we can and will do it again. Now is not the time to build walls. We did just that half a century ago, the consequences of which still reverberate today. No, now is the time to tear down our walls and to overcome the difficulties. Which is why I'm delighted to be part of tonight's celebration. The work of the awardees we will honor this evening is absolutely vital to defending freedom in our world. Thank you for being here. Thank you for honoring these individuals. And most importantly, thank you all for doing your own small part to ensure that the challenges we face today do not defeat us. It is now my honor to formally start the program. I ask you to please turn your attention to the video screen behind me as we honor Secretary Madeleine Albright. Thanks a lot.
Please welcome His Excellency Carl Bildt, former Prime Minister of Sweden. Bitte begrüßen Sie seine Exzellenz Carl Bildt, ehemaliger Premierminister Schwedens.
Madam Secretary Madeleine, I wasn't aware of that thing with the drums, but I hope we can get some elaboration on the background to that. I can also, before some remarks on Madam Secretary Madeleine, announce that it's still 0-0. And don't expect me to be very much more in terms of guidance on football. I'm well known in my country for being fairly less expert, let's put it like that, on these issues. There was an instance when I was Prime Minister at the time, and there was a World Championship in football going on, and the media came up to me, and the media, they always have their sort of devious plots, so they asked me whom I thought was going to win. And being Prime Minister of Sweden, I thought that I could only say I expect Sweden to win. And I thought that was a fairly good answer from the political point of view. It only turned out that Sweden wasn't playing that year. And those things do happen. I'm deeply honored to be asked to say a couple of words of the Freedom Award nominee, Madeleine Albright. Madeleine, if I'm allowed to say that, I am, is, in my opinion, a girl from and off Europe. From and off. From, obviously, born in Prague, then Czechoslovakia, before the war. And her family and herself was forced to flee from that Czechoslovakia when Hitler took over. But then, of course, Hitler was defeated. There was a new hope for Europe. They could return to their Prague, but then had to flee again in 1948, when Stalinism descended upon that half of Europe. And then the family and Madeleine ended up via Ellis Island, the Statue of Liberty in the United States. And that became, of course, the scene of her astonishing public career over the decades that followed. Started as an academic career, not very well known, political scientist, devoting her studies also to what happened in her native Czechoslovakia. But then, through her academic credentials, being dragged into public policy, foreign policy, working under Zbigniew Brzezinski, born not in Prague, but born in Warsaw, working under Zbigniew Brzezinski in the National Security Council under President Carter. But then, of course, became much more of a household name for all of us and acquired public prominence when she became the ambassador of the United States to the United Nations in 1993 under President Clinton with, if I remember, cabinet rank. So there are ambassadors and ambassadors, but then there are ambassadors with cabinet rank, and Madeleine was among those. And 1993 was a period of, let's remember that, profound hope. The Soviet Union had disappeared. Russia had embarked on a course of profound economic and political and democratic reforms. We are all engaged with and hopeful for the new Russia that emerged. Germany had reunified and started its new course. Poland was free, so was Czechoslovakia, but the Balkan area, the former Yugoslavia, was in flames. So it was a period of profound hope and possibilities, but also significant and difficult challenges in terms of where our Europe was heading. And Madeleine was, of course, in her position at the United Nations, deeply involved with all of this. In 1997, she was appointed Secretary of State. There have been very many Secretary of States in the history of the United States, I would assume, but she was the very first woman in that particular position and became the highest positioned woman in the United States federal government ever at that particular time. And that was also a time of challenges and possibilities. Just mention one thing that happened, and that was that what was then the Czech Republic was admitted into NATO. So the girl from Prague, who had been forced to flee that city from first Nazism, fascism, and then communism, was enabled to be instrumental in bringing that country into the community of free Atlantic nations. He stepped down as Secretary of State 17 years ago. That's a fairly long time ago. And a lot of public officials, as we know, they step down and then they write a book or two, and that's roughly it. Not Madeleine. Madeleine belongs to those rather rare individuals which I believe have been even more powerful after leaving office than when in office. Not having the power of the office, that's gone, but the power of ideas and the powers of conviction and the powers of inspiration. And that, in a sense, is over time far more powerful than any office in itself can bring. Her commitment to and her work for the different causes are well known. Starting with women or girls, and I think it is appropriate that Madeleine is honored here together with a number of other girls, because she has been a force for the empowerment of women in whatever positions they have all over the world during all of these years. Her work for freedom and democracy is, of course, perhaps what she is most well known for. Her leadership of the National Democratic Institute is perhaps the thing that one has heard, which has been her perhaps most important platform over these particular years, because that has made it possible for her voice to be heard all over the world for freedom and democracy. And we've seen that also in the last few months with her new book about fascism, A Warning, a bestseller, I understand, on so far the other side of Atlantic, hopefully on this side of the Atlantic as well. And then also, third should be mentioned, for refugees, whenever, wherever, coming from a very personal experience. So she has inspired many, multitudes on continents and throughout Europe, even more after having left office than when she was in office. And that, I think, is quite an achievement. I particularly remember, I think it was in December 2011, when we both, but primarily Madeleine, I would say, went to the funeral in Prague of Václav Havel, who was, of course, one of the absolutely leading lights of democracy and human rights in our part of the world. And Madeleine was among the few that was invited to speak in the cathedral, and spoke, of course, in Czech. I didn't understand what she said, but it was deeply moving and deeply important, and that was fairly obvious. I think it's highly appropriate that Madeleine gets the Freedom Award. And I think it's also very symbolic that it happens in the city of Berlin, that this girl from and of Europe gets the award in this city. This city of Berlin, where Nazism was defeated, where communism collapsed, and where Europe started to come together again, and where US leadership over the decades has been so profoundly important. So with these words, I just want to profoundly congratulate and ask Madeleine perhaps to come and receive the award.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister Bildt, or Carl, if I may, for those very kind words and for your friendship and for your immense contributions in the Balkans. We did a lot of things together, and your role was just incredibly important and central to what happened and what continues to be a very important part of the world. And also for your dedication to the cause of freedom. And it has been my pleasure and honor to keep our friendship going over the years and to intersect at various important conferences, and just to make sure that those of us that have cared about what happens in Europe and around the world continue to speak out. I want to commend tonight's other honorees, and let me just say that I'm very pleased to be with this incredible girls team. And also, the things that you have done are the things that I wanted to do. So Ariana Saeed, I have always wanted to sing. And so I'm delighted to be on the stage with you. And to Elisa Liz Munoz, who is representing the International Women's Media Foundation, I had wanted to be a journalist. And I actually was a little girl. So we have a lot in common, and I'm delighted to be up here with the girls team, and I want to thank all of you for what you have done and will yet to do on behalf of the values we all cherish. I can tell you about the drums, actually. What happened was that I was at the Kennedy Center with Chris Bodie, who plays the trumpet, and we went down to see him ahead of his show, and he actually said, sometimes when I have somebody in the audience that has a name, I ask them to come and play drums with me. Will you play drums with me? And I said, sure. I've never played drums before, but I did it. I've done it now a number of times, and my nickname is Sticks. So there's always time for a different career. I also want very much to thank the Atlantic Council, because it does in fact represent so many of the values that we all cherish. And I think for me, as Carl mentioned, I find myself as somebody who is dedicated to the European-American relationship and the importance of that relationship always being renewed. And the Atlantic Council is doing an incredible job. And for as long as I can remember, this organization has preached the gospel of international engagement on behalf of freedom, prosperity, and law. In recent years, the Council has acted with renewed vigor and purpose, and this is testament to the boundless energy of Fred Kemp and the wisdom of many on the board and many of the members who are here this evening. Council supporters understand the value of the transatlantic partnership and not only how important it is to those in Europe and the United States, but to people everywhere. And they also know that the values which underpin this history and this history-changing friendship are being challenged from inside and out. As the little girl in Czechoslovakia, and by the way, the picture of me in my national costume was when I was about your age. I always said my father was the ambassador, and I'm the little girl whose job it was to give flowers at the airport. That was what I did for a living at that time. And as a little girl in Czechoslovakia, I saw what happens when good and decent people fail to unite in the face of threats to freedom. And it disturbs me greatly to hear echoes and see shadows of that era in our day. Now as then, there are politicians who propagate conspiracy theories designed to nurture hate and fear among average citizens, who encourage followers to lash out at people who differ from themselves and who promise simple solutions to hard problems through the repression and degradation of others. Now as then, there are leaders who seek to monopolize authority by rewriting constitutions, co-opting the courts, weakening legislatures, and equating dissent with treason. Now as then, there are leaders who want us to believe that greatness is defined by spectacle, not character, that honor is irrelevant, and that winning means not having to answer any questions. We are gathered this evening in a city that was once decimated and divided, but now reborn into a capital at the heart of a new Europe. This history is a reminder that we cannot afford to be complacent. We have to draw a line between legitimate debate and efforts to augment power by chipping away at the foundations of democracy. Carl mentioned I have a new book. It has a very bland title, Fascism, A Warning. It has a very kind and bland cover, red and black. And it is, I have been told that it's alarming. It's supposed to be alarming. In the United States, we have a slogan that has been drilled into us in relation to the fight against terror. If we see something, such as an unattended suitcase or a backpack, we should say something. Well, I've added a third element to the slogan. See something, say something, and what I've added is do something. And that is why I have issued a warning in my new book. And that is why I say tonight that there is an urgent need for people on both sides of the Atlantic to stand together and vow that we will not allow the peddlers of hate to shape our future. We will not allow them to turn us against one another or to treat our neighbors with contempt. We will not allow them to hijack the institutions that ensure our freedom and define our democracies. We will not abandon all that have gained from decades of shared sacrifice. We will not accept the idea that we should simply go home and sleep, ignoring the gathering threats to peace. We will not remain silent as they strive to drain the meaning from words and to convince us that up is down and wrong is right and truth is whatever they claim it to be. Instead, in every country, from all parts of the political spectrum, we have to insist on the integrity of our own minds, the importance of democratic values, the rights of the majority and minorities, and the dignity of every human being. Because with those beliefs behind us, and with those beliefs as our support, I'm convinced that there's no threat before us against which we cannot prevail if we heed the warning, if we act in time, and if we learn from our other honorees tonight. I don't think there's been a speech or a book written in the United States that doesn't quote Robert Frost. And I'm doing the same thing, because what he wrote was, "Now that I'm old, my teachers are the young." And that could not be truer than this evening, because I can still be inspired when I see children like Bana coming together to demand the right to live in peace and freedom. We have a lot to learn from her. The cynics will tell you that there's nothing to be done about the crisis we find ourselves in today. But as Nelson Mandela said, everything is impossible until you do it. It is in that spirit of determination and solidarity that I accept this award tonight. I am deeply, deeply honored, and it is with gratitude and affection that I thank you again for honoring me this evening. This means a great deal to me from this organization in this incredible city. Thank you very much.
Please welcome Bellingcat analyst and 2018 European Press Prize finalist Nick Waters. Bitte begrüßen Sie Nick Waters, Bellingcat-Analyst und Finalist des 2018 Europäischen Pressepreises.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, Secretary Albright as well. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the story of Bana and Fatima Alabed, who used social media to document their experience of living through the siege of East Aleppo. The effort by Fatima and Bana to use social media to show the world what was happening from the perspective of their family humanized the unimaginably vast suffering of civilians within Syria. When we were asked to examine the social media presence of Bana, we were initially skeptical, since there have been instances where this kind of thing has been faked before. However, under the scrutiny, every single inconsistency fell apart. So the idea that there was no electricity, for example, was quite easily solved by the images and videos of solar panels and car batteries on the roof of the flat where they lived. The idea that there was no mobile signal, cell phone signal, was quite easily dismissed by the Syrian regime itself, who had sent threatening text messages to the population of East Aleppo. And finally, using the images and the videos that Bana and Fatima had posted themselves, we could geolocate their location to the neighborhood in East Aleppo, to the exact flat and floor in which they lived. However, this posed a bit of an ethical conflict, because this kind of level of information was dangerous. If we'd have posted it without assessing what we were doing, we could have put the Alabed family in danger. So we held back and we waited until finally we found out that the Alabed family had been, or their flat had been bombed, meaning that they had to escape into East Aleppo as the rebel-held pocket collapsed. At this point, we decided to publish our findings in the hope of showing that Bana and Fatima were real, and they were a real family in very real danger. And it was an incredible relief to see them several days later safe outside of the East Aleppo pocket. Since then, Bana has written a book and achieved absolutely extraordinary things as a very young girl. And it gives me great pleasure to award Bana, on behalf of the Atlantic Council, the Freedom Award. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to be here with all of you today in the evening. I want to thank all of you for coming to here. I want to thank the Atlantic Council for giving me this award. I'm so happy for standing up in front of you all. I came to here to share my story just 16 months ago. Me and my family were living in Aleppo under siege and bombing. I was afraid to die, but my biggest fear that one of my brothers will die. I am happy we are all alive today. One day without bombing in Syria, Aleppo, would make me the happiest person in the world, because I hate war. It destroyed all I had. It killed my friends. We lived under siege and bombing. I want to share my story so the world knows how the life. I asked my mom to help me sharing our story on Twitter so the world can know what is happening there and to help us to stop the war. I have many friends on Twitter. I love them. They give me support. They always text me. My friend J.K. Rowling, she is kind to us. She gave to me Harry Potter books. We shared our story as the war go on. It was dangerous. There was 2 days of big bombing and non-stopping. The third day, a bomb came and hit our lovely home. We went down and immediately go out. We ran away from our lovely home. Before we get out of Aleppo, me and my family were going from a place to another to search for some food and some water. Everyone was running. It was mad. I could see my brothers sad. They were tired. They just want peace. Children of Syria are tired of war. Getting out of Aleppo was my happiest day. There was no bombing, no more warplanes. I was like dreaming. I miss the days without bombing. I'm lucky I am alive. But I must say to all the leaders around the world, they are not helping enough to stop the war and to help the children. Many children are dying. There will be many refugees. If you want for your children and the world to have a better future, the leaders of the world must stand together to stop the war and help the children to have education. I believe the people can help to stop the war. I hope the young people can help to make the world better again. Thank you all for your attention. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy your dinner. The second half of the program will begin shortly. We will now switch to the Germany-Sweden World Cup game. Meine Damen und Herren, genießen Sie Ihr Abendessen. Das Programm wird gleich fortgesetzt. In der Pause schalten wir zum Spiel Deutschland gegen Schweden.
können den Ball immer auch mal laufen lassen. Die Ballpassagen sind im Vergleich zu den Spielen vor einigen Jahren länger geworden. Gündoğan. So, aus der Position heraus ist Deutschland schon einige Male gefährlich geworden. Reus. Unruhe stiften. Irgendwas machen. 3,5 Minuten. Und für Gündoğan heißt es Rhythmus aufnehmen, reinkommen, Ballsicherheit kriegen, aber sich auch was zutrauen.
Everybody's trying to beat one another, you know. They trying to beat one another to this spot. I gotta get there first. I gotta get this first. I don't care what it takes to get there, but I'm gonna get there. That's City Life to me.
Vielleicht kommt sie noch. Die eine Chance. Aber so nicht. Unbequemer Gegner, der sich reingekämpft hat in diese Partie, der am Anfang hinten überfordert wirkte. Und in Deutschland, so hart das klingt, stark gemacht hat, aufgebaut hat. Wieder Einladungen ausgesprochen, die dankend angenommen wurden. So, gibt es nochmal den Freistoß. Bisschen Theatralik im Spiel. Wohl die letzte Aktion. Bergmann! Kein Abseits. Aber das ist Tiefschlaf. Tut mir leid, das ist Tiefschlaf. Ein Freistoß kurz vor der Pause. Alle stehen zu und schauen. Das kann einfach nicht sein. Das ist teilweise unerklärlich. Eine Weltklasse-Parade von Manuel Neuer und ein Weltmeistertrainer, der ein richtiges Problem hat. Hätte ich so nicht gedacht nach der Anfangsphase. Toivonen weiß mal wieder, wie es sich anfühlt, ein Tor zu erzielen. Zu viele Fehler, zu viele Rückschläge. Hoffentlich stehen sie noch mal auf. Hoffentlich krabbeln sie da raus. Im Moment Schockstarre in den deutschen Fanblöcken hier in Sotschi. Die großen Hoffnungen des Weltmeisters drohen im Schwarzen Meer versenkt zu werden. Es ist noch nicht so weit. Die Mannschaft hat die besseren Spieler, die besseren Einzelspieler sowieso und noch alle Chancen. Die Tagesschau, danach melden sich Matthias, Alex und Thomas Hitzelsberg.
Die FIFA-WM im Ersten. Deutschland gegen Schweden. Die Übertragung. Präsentiert von Check24. Das Vergleichsportal.
the music. The music is me. The music is you. The music can be something we do. Music is good and music is right, and music can stand strong right through the night, and music can hold you, music can keep you safe from harm and her beautiful arms. Music is you, the thing we do, it's the thing we do, it's the thing we do, it's the thing I do to get me through. Yeah, it's the thing I do to get me through. It's the thing I do to get me through. It's the thing I do to get me through.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The program is about to begin. Meine Damen und Herren, bitte nehmen Sie jetzt wieder Ihre Plätze ein. Das Programm beginnt in Kürze. Please welcome Atlantic Council Executive Vice President Damon Wilson. Bitte begrüßen Sie Atlantic Council Executive Vice President Damon Wilson.
Good evening, everyone. I hope you're enjoying your evening. We're entering the second half of the program as Sweden and Germany are in a tie. So we're going to do our best to compress this program and get you back out to the game tonight. But as you follow along for the second half, please continue to expand the conversation by using the hashtag AC Awards. As Horst Teltschuk and Secretary Albright underscored in the first half, that as we celebrate courageous leaders who have stood for freedom over past decades, we must also remain focused on the important work ahead of us. You will hear shortly from two additional deserving honorees, the International Women's Media Foundation and the inspiring and talented Ariana Saeed. But first, I want to draw your attention to the video screen. In partnership with Canada's Centre for International Governance Innovation, the Atlantic Council is launching an ambitious new initiative aimed at advancing peace, freedom, and prosperity, and advocating the changes that are needed to make these principles work in our time. After the video, Atlantic Council Executive Vice Chair and co-chair of this particular initiative, former National Security Advisor Stephen Hadley, will say a few more words on why this effort is so critical. Mr. Hadley, among the world's greatest strategists, himself has made quite a contribution to the cause of freedom. So let me direct your attention to the video screen.
We face a time of extraordinary challenges. For 7 decades, the world's democracies have relied on common principles to advance freedom, foster prosperity, and defend the security of our nations. The result has been a better life for millions, at home and around the world. But today, these principles are under attack from within and without. Stagnant wages and uneven trade benefits have left many people behind. Increased migration is fueling concerns about jobs and national identity. The rule of law is being challenged, and faith in our institutions has been shaken. Dictators around the world are undermining our values. They are meddling in our elections, interfering in the affairs of their neighbors, and threatening the world with terrorism and weapons of mass destruction, while oppressing their own people. There is a real danger that we could go back to a world where there are no rules, and where might makes right. Now is the time for us to act together. It's time to join with like-minded citizens at home and around the world and commit to common principles. Together, we have faced up to challenges like these before. If we work together, we can succeed again. It's time to stand up for freedom and defend our values. It's time to expand free markets and include those who have been left behind. It's time to reaffirm the strength and values of the free world, a rules-based world, our world, and make it work for everyone.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be with you tonight. Our future security, prosperity, and peace will depend on our working together to revise and adapt and reinvigorate the international system in a way that responds to the geopolitical and internal challenges described in the film clip we've just seen. The key question will be, what are the common principles that should be the foundation of this 21st century international system? The effort that Damon Wilson has described and that is captured in the video we just saw is an attempt to answer this crucial question. And I'm honored to join Secretary Madeleine Albright, Prime Minister Carl Bildt, and former Japanese Foreign Minister Yuriko Kawaguchi in serving as a co-chair of this important and timely initiative. And we are pleased that Tzipi Livni, Wolfgang Ischinger, and others who are part of this effort were able to join us in Berlin. Those of us who are committed to an international system that favors freedom and the rule of law must join together and take action to adapt, revitalize, and defend that system. Our effort already includes representatives from both the developed and the developing worlds, including countries like India, Indonesia, and Brazil. Our goal is to produce a declaration that outlines the fundamental principles of this rules-based system and sets forth the core beliefs and values that we are striving to uphold. But it is not sufficient for a group of foreign policy elites to engage with each other. To succeed, we must engage a skeptical public, listen to their concerns, and generate formulations of these principles that can gain broad support. For this reason, over the coming weeks, the Atlantic Council and our Canadian partner will launch an effort to reach out to and engage parliamentary and congressional officials, local and community leaders, the private sector, and especially our younger citizens, the next generation, on the principles that should be included in the declaration. If we can secure adequate funding, we plan to use town hall sessions, roundtable events, a web-based crowdsourcing platform, and a proactive social media campaign to gain both input and ownership from a broader audience. Principles and declarations will not themselves bring results. Steps to implement the principles will be as important as the principles themselves. So we will seek to develop actionable strategies to encourage not only governments, but also business, universities, civil society, the voluntary sector, and empowered citizens to take concrete actions to defend these principles and advance a rules-based international system. Many such actions can be taken now without waiting for governments. At the same time, we want to encourage an inclusive international system, and we will seek to engage with other global powers, including China, who may not share in all of our principles, but who are willing to work cooperatively to advance those on which we can agree. This effort cannot succeed without a broad coalition from across our nations to advance our beliefs in fundamental freedoms and democracy, open and inclusive markets, shared values and human rights, and the rule of law. We hope you will join us. The success of such an effort may determine whether the international system descends into chaos and less benevolent actors fill the void, or emerges, revised and revitalized, to build a more stable and prosperous world for everyone. Thank you very much.
Please welcome Katie Harbeth, Facebook's Global Politics and Government Outreach Director. Bitte begrüßen Sie Katie Harbeth, Facebook's Global Politics and Government Outreach Director.
Good evening. I'm Katie Harbeth. Tonight I have the honor of introducing the third awardee of this evening, the International Women's Media Foundation. Before I start, can I just say how happy I am that it is, as Secretary Albright said, we are honoring the Girls Club tonight. For those of you who don't know about the IWMF, this is an incredible organization dedicated to ensuring that women journalists across the globe are supported, protected, and recognized. Their work spans across the globe from Latin America to the Great Lakes region of Africa. To give you an idea of some of the incredible scope and impact of their work, here are just some of the IWMF's accomplishments. Since 2014, the IWMF has trained more than 400 women, journalists worldwide, in hostile environment and first aid training to better prepare them for the potential scenarios they might find themselves in when reporting in dangerous places. The IWMF has supported more than 250 journalists as IWMF Fellows, whose stories have raised awareness and reshaped the press narrative around a range of issues, including food security, women's empowerment, and conservation. And since 1990, the IWMF has awarded more than 100 women journalists with their annual Courage in Journalism Award to raise awareness of the struggles women journalists face in reporting from countries where threats, intimidation, and government oppression are common, and to honor the women who continue to demonstrate a commitment to press freedom despite these impediments. One of those journalists, Andrea Bruce, is here today. There is another, less obvious reason that the work of the IWMF is so important, and that's one that I'm intimately familiar with my role at Facebook. I'm a firm believer that many of the crises of our time result from a disconnect between governments, businesses, and the media. In ensuring that the voices of women and other unrepresented groups are heard, the IWMF is also doing a great service to close the gap between these different organizations. Moreover, on a personal note, the first job I ever had was being a teen reporter for my hometown newspaper, the Green Bay Press-Gazette. I majored in journalism at UW-Madison, and while it's not the profession I ended up in, journalism is my first love. That's another reason why I'm in awe and grateful for the work that IWMF does. So please join me in a round of applause for Executive Director Elisa Liz-Munoz, who will be accepting the award on behalf of the International Women's Media Foundation 2018 Atlantic Council Freedom Awardee. Thank you.
Thank you. It is truly a great honor to receive the Atlantic Council's Freedom Award on behalf of the International Women's Media Foundation. 30 years ago, the IWMF was founded on the principle that the press cannot truly be free without the equal voice of women. We stand by that statement today and challenge the traditional analysis of press freedom that disregards the persistent gender imbalance in the news media. The ability of women to work in and serve as leaders in the news media has broad societal implications. Sexual harassment, threats, attacks, government oppression, a stubborn glass ceiling, unequal pay, accusations of fake news, and a growing mistrust of the media all threaten press freedom around the world. And female journalists often bear the brunt of these attacks. Irina Bokova, Director General of UNESCO, has described it as a double attack. Women are being targeted both for being journalists and for being female. The IWMF enables women journalists to have the freedom to report the stories they choose and want to report. For many, this means a work environment that is free from harassment, where their ideas are welcomed, where they are paid equally, where policies do not penalize them for their gender, and where they have equal access to assignments and sources. To be balanced, outlets need a bench of reporters who reflect the diversity of people and topics they cover. Reporters are and must be versatile, but when most bylines are by men, audiences are not getting the full story or the insights that come from a lived experience. You can help. On World Press Freedom Day this year, we launched a campaign called #CheckYourBylines. We asked people to take note of the gender diversity in their news feeds. For example, in the April-May issues of The Atlantic, 6 out of 8 authors were women. In Foreign Affairs, only 3 of 29 authors were women. In Foreign Policy, 6 of 18 authors were women. And in The New Yorker, only 4 of 21 authors were women. In Europe, researchers who looked at reporters' bylines and the images accompanying stories found that in nearly every country in their study, across both print and digital, men wrote most of the content. A diversity of voices in the news media is needed to adequately report the complexities in our world. Of course, diversity is not only an issue of gender. To give a real-time example, it has been noted that the majority of journalists covering the situation on the Mexico-Texas border do not speak Spanish and are relying on security agents as translators and as sources. What is being missed and whose voices are not being heard? Imagine the stories that we missed when foreign bureaus in Afghanistan did not hire local females because it caused too many problems with their Afghani male staff. Or the voices left silent because, as one IWMF fellow has stated, sometimes it takes going through 6 men to be able to speak to one woman. In many countries, a male journalist speaking to females is simply impossible. Yesterday, Andrea Bruce told us about the image that she felt had the most impact. It was an image of a baby who died of hypothermia. She had access to that scene because she is a woman. However, it is not easy being a woman in the news media today, and the more you know about the peril they face to simply do their job, the more one must admire and honor them. The IWMS programs are specifically designed to address many of the challenges that they face. Recently, we have focused on providing opportunities to obtain bylines by organizing reporting trips in the Great Lakes region of Africa and Central America, with a specific focus on ensuring diverse reporting in regions where the mainstream coverage is limited and often focused on the negative. We are one of few organizations that provides grants to female journalists to allow them to cover the stories they want, to address the situations where opportunities have been denied. There is one barrier, however, that inhibits women journalists more than any other. In the era of Me Too, I would be remiss not to mention the invasive impact of sexual and online harassment on the ability of all of us to receive balanced and free journalism. 2/3 of women journalists worldwide have been victims of harassment, according to our research, and an astounding 60% experience these attacks in their place of work. Who would have thought that a female journalist is in greater peril at the hands of her colleagues and supervisors than she is in the field? But the online world is where journalists experience most threats and attacks and intimidation today. According to IWMF research that will be published later this summer, 90% of respondents to our survey believe that online harassment is on the rise. Female respondents believe that their gender is the leading contributor. These experiences have a profound and long-lasting effect on journalists. At least 1/3 of respondents to our survey have symptoms similar to those of PTSD due to online harassment. The effects also run deep in the heart of the industry. 30% of respondents report practicing some form of self-censorship, and 29% have contemplated leaving the profession altogether. Attacks against female journalists are personal. They are often violent in tone and misogynistic, and they are driving people out of the profession, which should worry all of us. As I accept the 2018 Atlantic Council Freedom Award on behalf of the International Women's Media Foundation, I challenge each of you to help change the status quo. This is a room full of leaders and influencers. If each of you simply asks whether you're receiving balanced information by noticing the gender of your newsfeed and choosing to click on articles written by women, commenting to media outlets when you see a lack of diversity, and standing up for those you see being harassed online and in person, you will be part of the solution. As our friend and benefactor Howard Buffett has said, if there are people out there trying to shut women journalists up, let's make it hard for them. Thank you. Thank you.
Please welcome HuffPost Editor-in-Chief Lydia Polgreen. Bitte begrüßen Sie HuffPost Chefredakteurin Lydia Polgreen.
Last August, a talented and globally renowned artist had an idea. She would play a concert in her hometown, Kabul, to celebrate the Independence Day of her beloved country, Afghanistan. As you can imagine, concerts are a pretty rare occasion in Kabul, and this particular artist, with her sensuous dance moves and proudly feminist lyrics, was already living under the shadow of a fatwa from the Taliban. The authorities in Kabul urged her to cancel. They could not guarantee her safety, nor that of her fans. But to the surprise of precisely no one, Ariana Saeed was not afraid. She refused to be intimidated. And that night, she treated more than 3,000 delirious fans to an unforgettable show. There is no greater expression of human dignity and freedom than making art, especially under the duress of war. Ariana Saeed has been making art and celebrating beauty her whole life. She was born in Kabul to a Pashto-speaking father and a Dari-speaking mother, leaving her country at the age of 8 and settling in the UK. Her subsequent return several years ago convinced her of the need for change after seeing the treatment of women and children in her beloved country. Hearing Ariana's story for the first time, I felt a parallel to my own career. In my work as a journalist, I've witnessed firsthand the oppression of women's rights. I've seen people ostracized for their sexual orientation, and I have watched people be persecuted for their political beliefs. But I've also seen the powerful transformation that can take place when someone speaks out. I know it takes immense courage to be the first, To take a stand against any form of inequality means opening oneself up to criticism, threats, and both physical and abstract threats. Ariana has been subjected to all of this. Her dedication to her cause at times meant that she had to trade dresses for flak jackets and fan clubs for bodyguards. Yet she's chosen to persevere, dedicating her music career to gender equality in Afghanistan. Her songs, sung in both Dari and Pashto, which is unusual for Afghan artists, are accessible to everyone regardless of their ethnic identity. And her music videos, including I Am a Woman and Champion, have racked up millions of views, all with a core message of women's empowerment. Even as she gains international fame, Ariana has never forgotten her roots and her commitment to the country of her birth. Acting as a mentor to girls who look to her for inspiration, she has supported dozens of young aspiring artists. For these reasons and many more, please join me in a round of applause for Ms. Ariana Saeed, the 2018 Atlantic Council Freedom Awardee.
Thank you, dear Lydia. Before everything else, I just want to say to the little beautiful girl in there, Bana, with your speech tonight, you truly touched my heart. And I was actually crying. My makeup artist tonight, funny enough, she actually told me to put fake lashes on my eyes, and I was crying and I was scared that I hope my lashes don't come out. You actually reminded me of my own story when I was in Afghanistan, and I was about eight years old when a rocket actually landed in our house. It hit our house while we were sleeping in the middle of the night. And the rocket luckily landed on a big, gigantic tree which was in our garden, and that tree actually saved our lives. But I still live with that trauma from my childhood, and it's never forgotten. But anyhow, now I will start with my speech. Respected guests of honor, dear colleagues at Atlantic Council, my dear friends and family, ladies and gentlemen. As a woman from Afghanistan, and that too being a female artist, from a country where not so long ago, music was completely banned, I feel extremely honored and blessed to be standing here right now. When my manager notified me of the fact that we were contacted by a prestigious organization such as the Atlantic Council, and I was being considered as a nominee for Freedom Award, and that too in the company of such respected and honorable international leaders such as Madeleine Albright and my other fellow nominees, it was a bit of a shock to me. And of course, a good type of shock that was. I will make a small confession here tonight. Shortly after hearing the news, I had tears in my eyes. Of course, they were tears of joy, but in addition, they were tears of triumph, as the voice of an Afghan woman was finally heard, and heard in a manner that was beyond my imagination. I hear this quite often about how brave I am, how daring and so courageous, but I want you and the rest of the world to know tonight that my courage does not come from me, but actually from the champion women of Afghanistan who, despite hardship and despair, still continue to struggle and fight on. Back in 2011, while I was on the plane returning to Afghanistan for the first time after leaving as a child, I'll be honest and admit that I was scared and very, very nervous. I was leaving the comfort of a peaceful life and not having the fear of potentially getting killed only so through my art and music, I could bring a smile to the beautiful faces of my people and some joy to their hearts. I was actually flying into a war zone. A place where even if you're not a target, you could still accidentally get killed by being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Many of you may find this funny and interesting, but I actually accepted to perform a concert in Afghanistan for the first time without even getting paid, and that continues to be the case for me till this day for all my concert performances there. My first ever trip from the airport to my hotel in Kabul was extremely emotional and heartbreaking. All I could see through the windows of my car was a broken land, dust, destruction, sadness, and misery. I could barely see a smile on anyone's face, and the sight of many children, both boys and girls, and women, begging on the street while holding their babies brought tears to my eyes. For a moment, even I almost became hopeless. But then I experienced something that I did not expect myself. During my concerts in Kabul, when I stepped out on the stage, the joyful screams, the big smiles, and the mere energy, it literally was the most amazing experience as much for me as much as it was for them. What gave me more hope was the presence of some women in the audience as well. Yes, not so many of them, but a few brave and strong ones were there to show their love and support to me. That was only the beginning of a long-term relationship with the land I was born in for many years to come. The fact that the TV station received a warning letter after the concert was broadcasted is another story that we'll not discuss tonight. Since then, I have been threatened to death, protested against, had fatwas or religious decrees passed against me, one of them even asking for my head to be cut off, faced much resistance and opposition, yet I have experienced much more love and support from the normal people for every step I have taken. While Afghanistan continues to be the land where radicalism and extremism have survived, the path taken by most of the new generation towards education and prosperity definitely provides a ray of hope for a brighter future. Trust me, if I did not have the support of a majority of my people, I would not have survived and thrived for my current position today. While taking this opportunity, I would like to communicate to the world out there that there is still hope for Afghanistan. The fact that I, as an Afghan female artist and as a human and women's rights activist, can step in the middle of a football field in Kabul and perform in front of thousands in the city where not so long ago, women were viciously executed by being shot in the head on the very same field is a clear indication that progress is being made, slowly but surely. Today, thousands of girls are able to pursue education in Afghanistan, while not so long ago, girls were completely banned from schools. I hope together we can empower the rest of the country so in not so distant future, everyone can pursue education, which is the basic human right and requirement. To my people, to the Afghan population around the world, I urge you to remain united so as one we can help rebuild our motherland. And lastly, I want to dedicate this award to two beautiful young women, Farkhunda, who was beaten by a vicious crowd, burned and murdered because she spoke against superstitions and dark-minded, and Rukhsana, the beautiful young lady who was stoned to death only because she had fallen in love. And to all the Farkhundas and Rukhsanas in Afghanistan whose voice we do not hear and whose stories we do not see on the news. I would like to thank the Atlantic Council for this outstanding recognition Also, I would like to congratulate my fellow nominees, in whose mighty company I feel extremely honored. Thanks to my family and my friends over there, and those involved in my artistic life, especially my amazing songwriter, Suleiman Didar, and my amazing band, on whose behalf my drummer, Erdem, is here. And also to the one person that, without whose support I could never reach to where I am today, my partner in crime, my manager, Hasib Syed. Honestly, you've taught me so much about life, and you have helped me grow as a person and find a purpose in life. Thank you for putting up with me all these years. I would like to thank the Afghan population worldwide, especially the champion women of Afghanistan, without whose constant love and support, I would not be standing here today. While accepting this award, I hereby take an oath and make a promise that as long as there's life in me, I'll fight for you and I will raise your voice till my last breath.
نباشم هستی نایاب تو کو وجود مردهای ناب تو کو اگر روداب حامل نبودم محمد رستم و سهراب زن هستم من زن هستم من زن هستم.
Thank you so much. Thank you. For those of you who obviously don't speak and understand Farsi, these were the few lines that I just sang in Farsi for you guys, and I would like to translate that so you can get a bit of an idea what this was about. So it says, if I didn't exist, where would your unique existence be? Where would be the existence of your rare men? If it wasn't for Rodaba and Amina, where would be your Muhammad, Rustam, and Sohrab? I am the one who gave birth to your heroes and prophets. Yes, I'm a woman, I'm a woman, I am a woman. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that amazing gift to all of us, which we hadn't expected. And so what a wonderful voice, what a wonderful story, what an inspirational evening. If I could ask all the awardees and the introducers and speakers to please come to the stage for a family photo, and if you could applaud them all as they come up there, and please join us for the next Freedom Awards. Thank you so much for coming.